So, real quick, I was just in terms of agenda tonight. I did receive a couple of requests, so we'll do a little bit of that. We'll do a request, and then finish up some Kohelet, and then another request. So, and we'll see how much time we have at that point. Now, before we get going, though. I was thinking about the fact that it's my last night with all of you, and don't outthink it, Tim. It's not that big of a deal.
It's not worded great, but
It's fine. It's fine. It's totally fine. So I was thinking about how much fun I've legit had doing this class. I'm not just saying that. I mean, yeah, it's true. I say that to pretty much every class, but I actually mean it in this instance. And I'm actually slightly sad about, being done, because it's been a lot of fun for me. So I wanted to say thank you for that. I started thinking about how it would be really cool if we could come up with some sort of emblem of how much fun it was, and I thought it would be neat to find something that would sort of represent our time together, and that, like something that you guys could like pass around, like one person could keep it for a little while. And then you're like, hey, do you remember D school? And you hand them the thing. So I came up with, as a little token of our time together, twin fawns of a gazelle.
Who do they go to first?
So, I'm not, yeah, who should we, go home with these? Twin fawns of gazelle. And so if you want to pass those back, that would be great.
I feel like I can't pass them to anyone without being inappropriate. This doesn't mean anything, but it means everything. Thank you for your thoughtfulness.
So once a week we pass those off.
Hey, take your time. I want to have a Okay. So, I had two requests. One was Revelation, to which I promptly said no. And the other was Genesis 9. We'll do a little bit of that later. But I started thinking about it, and it's like, okay, I mean, I'm not, here's the thing. You're probably never, ever going to get me to, teach a class on Revelation. It's not my, I'm ignorant. So it's not something that I've done a really good study on. And however, there are a couple of things that I can say. Now, this is going to pertain to Revelation. This will pertain to Daniel, the second half of Daniel, chapters 7 through 12. This will pertain to Zechariah, and a little bit of Isaiah. So just a couple of things to be aware of when you go attempt to read the book of Revelation, or the second half of Daniel, or the book of Zechariah, or what we call mini apocalypse in the book of Isaiah. So the Revelation chapter in the book, as far as I can tell, is pretty decent, and I'm opening up to it because I want to write apocalyptic on the board, and I don't have a clue how to spell it. I mean, I know it starts with an A, but so it's what we call apocalyptic literature. I think I spelled it right. Now, Revelation's a little bit weird because there's letters, there's apocalyptic kind of stuff, but apocalypse is a genre. It is a genre that uses a lot of imagery, okay? A lot of imagery. So it's very imagery heavy, but it's not poetry, right? It shares in common with poetry the fact that it uses imagery, but obviously it's not written as a poem. Typically with apocalyptic, there's some sort of intermediary. This is just part of the genre. And what I mean by that is somebody shows the vision to somebody else. There's some sort of intermediary figure that is involved. All right? It's not a huge thing, but it's just an observation that it normally happens. So at the very beginning of the book of Revelation, the revelation from Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants what must soon take place, he made it known by sending his messenger to his servant John, right? So the intermediary is that messenger or the angel, whatever it was. And that's a normal feature of apocalyptic. Now, apocalyptic as a genre, basically here's the point. Okay, so if you were ever wondering, like, what is the point of the book of Revelation? Okay, here's the point. When everything goes to poo, no matter how bad it seems, God wins. Period. Okay? It's what apocalyptic does. It's imagery of like, it's kind of like, you know, like every superhero movie that's ever been made. This is how a super movie works. There's some introduction of the superhero, and the superhero is demonstrated to be in some way super. And then at some point, the superhero is going to have an interaction with a bad guy, and the bad guy's going to win. But somehow the superhero manages to escape, and then has to, like, somehow get better. You know, they have to search within, or they have to go train on the mountain, or they have to get whatever it is, and then eventually they're going to confront the bad guy again, and they're going to win. But before they win, the movie makers try and make it seem as impossible as possible. Right? Even though you're sitting there, you're sitting there the whole time going, we already know who's going to win. What's the point? Well, okay, that's what I do. You know, it's my own bias. That part of the movie is just the boring part that I can't stand. Because it's like, we know the hero's going to win, so this overly dramatic, oh my gosh, the odds are so against me, it's just like, whatever. But anyway, so if you imagine slicing out that part of the movie, where all evidence is telling you we lose, we're going to lose, you know, the world is coming to an end, or whatever it is, that's Revelation. It's painting that sort of scenario, right, where just you just look at it and there's like, oh my goodness, you know, is God losing or whatever, right? And the point is, God wins. Okay, does that make sense so far? All right, now, just need to make okay, that way I won't forget. Okay, the book of Revelation is often compared to a political cartoon. Okay, So hence the political cartoon.
Can you read it?
Yeah. So here's cartoon. This guy is saying we're going to need your shield and lance to pay for free stuff. All right? Now, this is an image, right? Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So imagine, here's some message that is being given by some deity, and the message is intended for you, okay? And I'm the intermediary, and I'm like, hey, I have a vision for you. Okay? And then you go try and describe it. All right? Now, the temptation is going to be to like explain it. And I didn't say explain it, I said describe it. Okay? What I mean is, describe is something like, there was a great dragon with smoke coming out of his nostril and a pointy arrow tail snarling toward, right? Like that's describe. As opposed to explain, which is, hey, there's this dragon, which really is just China, and the point of the, right? That's explain, okay? And what, all right, so now imagine that you describe it. You don't explain it, you describe this cartoon, okay? There's a great dragon sitting on the edge of a cliff, blah, 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 and you describe it. And you write that description down. Okay? You with me so far? And then 2,000 years later, someone picks up your description and reads it and tries to figure out what the heck you're talking about. Welcome to the book of Revelation. Okay? So, in order, Revelation is one of those books that if you don't know the first century world, you're going to struggle. All right? And so, therefore, since none of us know the first century world all that well, I'm including myself in that, I will say, if you read one thing on the book of Revelation, it's Baucham's volume, which I thought they referenced in here, because I can never remember how to spell his name, so I'm looking for, there it is, B-A-U-C-K Han, right, B-A-U-C-K Han. So, Richard Bauckham, British New Testament scholar, wrote a book called Theology of the Book of Revelation. Theology of the Book of Revelation. All right. So it's not big, you know. It's a relatively short book. So what I would say is, if you're interested in Revelation, read the chapter in the book. All right. Remember that apocalyptic is image heavy, and you can kill the computer at this point. I just wanted to show that thing. It's image heavy, and you're getting descriptions of sometimes of the image, sometimes of what the image evokes, right? And remember our conversation about imagery and poetry, or remember our two fawns that are going around the room. It's not about a description per se, as much as it is about what it evokes. Okay, and so like when you have the dragon of Babylon, or whatever that weird stuff is, like people will try and pinpoint, oh, this is the whatever, or the women with the swirling hair thing, oh, that's helicopters, with the teeth, how they used to paint like the jaws on the front of the helicopters, and I mean, I don't know, I have memories as a kid like sitting and hearing this kind of stuff, and it's like, just don't do that, okay? Just don't do that. It's evoking a lot of stuff that is that we're going to struggle to relate to, because we're not living under persecution from the Caesars, and we're not part of that first century world, etc. Okay, so go easy with the Book of Revelation. Okay, don't start hanging up your weird wall charts. All right, does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's really all I'm going to say about Revelation. Okay? It's pretty fantastic. So,
Do you have like a one-liner advice you give to like somebody who's definitely too deep into like trying to understand all of it, as if it's gonna unfold and they're gonna interpret everything?
no. No, I don't, because I find that those people are, they're too far into what they're into. There's nothing to say at that point, other than, cool, wow, good luck. Well, God wins. All right. God wins. Woohoo! So. All right. How we doing? Okay. All right. I'd like to carry on with a little bit of Kohelet. All right. So, quick review. So any questions about anything before I get going? Okay. So we started looking at how Kohelet, the assemblyman, the preacher, whatever, however you translate that, is looking at different things and basically saying it's all vapor. And we talked a little bit about how on the front end that can feel very pessimistic, right? Very cynical, very doom and gloom or whatever. But actually it can be really liberating. I think the point of the book is that this should be a liberating thing. And so we were starting to unpack that and take a look at it. And so we saw how the poem in chapter 1, he's referencing our work, right? Because he says in verse 3, what do you gain from all of your work? And basically it's like, look, there's nothing new. You're not going to come up with something that people are going to remember you for, they will remember me. No, they won't, is the response of Kohelet, right? And then he looks at study, right? Wisdom, education, however you want to look at that. It's like, well, that's vapor and wearisome, which I can affirm. And so he's like, well, screw it. If none of that stuff matters, then you might as well just enjoy yourself, right? Like, what? If the work you do is not inherently valuable, then you might as well just go have fun and not worry about it. So he tries that out. It's like, well, that's vapor, right? He tries out the the grand public works kind of stuff, it's kind of like, be kind of like the version, or it's like the Ecclesiastes version of you've done great work, you've acquired wealth, you've built a name for yourself, and now there's a ginormous building cancer ward with your name in, ginormous across the side, right? It's that kind of stuff. And he's like, well, vapor, you know. That's what we saw. Right? Make sense? Okay, and I went on a big tirade about how meaningless sometimes fits, but sometimes doesn't, and so just think vapor. Right?
Yeah.
And then we looked at, for example, I don't remember which one we looked at, but there's these moments where he says, well, here's the deal. So for example, at chapter 2, verse 24, people can do nothing better than to eat and drink and just find satisfaction in your work, period. All right? It's all vapor. So just eat and drink and find satisfaction in the work. Make sense? So he says that in chapter 2, verse 24, and he calls it, basically he calls it a gift from God. The ability to eat and drink and just find satisfaction in your work is a gift from God. Chapter 3, verse 12. I know that there is nothing better than to just be happy and do good, eat and drink, and find satisfaction in your work. It's a gift from God. That's why he reiterates this same thing. And it's kind of a refrain in the early chapters of the book. This basic idea of, hey, just eat and drink, and just find satisfaction in your work. All right? Now, I'd like to pose a question. Well, sorry. That's basically how far we got last week. Right? Okay, so I'd like to pose a question this week. Okay? Let's see. Pick on someone. Okay, so Tyler, you
Yes.
you sell roofs, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Now, did I get it right?
You got it. I mean, yes.
Okay.
I feel like you're trapping me, but yes.
No, I'm actually not trapping you. I just, you know, I just was looking for an update because it's been a while since you told me.
Yes.
So yeah, you're still doing that.
Yes.
Okay. Now, so here's the question. Pastor Matthew is a pastor. Okay? Is Matthew's work inherently more valuable than Tyler's?
Go ahead, people.
I would say no.
What if we vote?
I would say yes.
Okay.
I guess you have to define value.
Why would you say yes?
Because his work, why are you bouncing?
He's chopping
The
at the
initial thought was his work is like dealing with the care of human souls, and
Okay.
people's salvation. Mine is keeping an asset dry.
Right.
So, just thinking of a job well done for him versus a job well done for me. What's the value? What's the gain? What's the impact? That's why I said yes.
Brilliant. You make a strong case.
I'm a salesperson.
What about you sell roofs now? You used to sell cars.
Uh-huh.
Is selling roofs inherently more valuable than selling cars?
Paycheck wise.
I'm trying to think how to, by that same rubric, I would say no.
Okay.
I don't know, it's kind of,
All right, fair
physical
enough.
things.
What about, are there any teachers? We have teachers, right? Oh, you're a teacher. What do you teach? Where? What?
Preschool, special education preschool
All right.
in Gretna.
In Gretna? Okay, is teaching special education preschool in Gretna inherently more valuable than selling roofs?
Easy.
Oh, yeah.
Easy.
Yes or no?
Careful now.
Can't work inherently.
I think it depends on why you're doing it, like what's your purpose in doing it? What's your, there's good, intentions. Some people have good intentions and some don't, and some have, I mean, it's how you, choose to live your work, you know, or carry out your work. Is it to honor God and to carry out His will, or is it, because I mean, you know, I wanna make some really bad money as a school educator, I know this, because I am one. You know, or, you know, what is your purpose, I guess? That's what, I don't know. I'm starting the conversation.
Brilliant.
I'm not, I know I'm not right, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong.
Well, wouldn't it
Yes.
go back to the
Oh.
hand cannot do what the foot can do, so the hand needs to sell the roofs, and the foot needs to go do the preschool, and it's how God made us. There's no way I could go well, I maybe could, but not to Jackie's level to be in around, I mean, that's a gift.
You called her a foot. I don't know.
They're important, I don't call the fence test.
You have a damaged foot, nobody goes anywhere.
Is the foot inherently more valuable than the, anyway. All right, good, what else?
I mean,
Other
isn't that
thoughts?
the same question as, you know, is a mom more important than dad?
I don't know.
And I think that's a question that's only going to end up with someone on the couch.
Definitely not.
Okay, they're both parents though, as opposed to, you know, I mean, that's kind of an apples to apples thing, right? Mom and dad?
Yeah.
Does it feel,
It depends on the individual situation, though, like,
All right.
I
Depends on
don't,
the
you know,
kid.
what are you really asking?
'Cause that's not-
I've got one more thought.
okay,
So if you can like remove the cliche from the phrase "make the world a better place,"
yeah,
and I think that's the way I would view value. And kind of back to the Pastor Matthew example, like if he just does his job well, you know, you change lives, you take people from members of society who may or may not contribute, may cause harm, to like flourishing and making the world a better place and picking up trash on the side of the road and inviting people to church and feeding the homeless versus me, job well done. How much impact can my job make the world a better place? I mean, you could like go like, oh yeah, then you can be financially generous. Great, maybe that's where you're going with this. But like just what I do tactically, there's a limit to how much it can make the world a better place.
Well, what about if we don't use Pastor Matthew? What about if we just use a pastor? That he literally just preaches, that's it.
Yeah, if you're looking at just the characteristics of the job description, just your job.
I think, Tyler, like, remember the example you gave, the one day you were driving and you just felt like God telling you to stop at Target, and it was a Target or a store?
Baker's.
Baker's.
Yeah.
And you went in the store and like you found somebody there and you prayed for them.
Yeah.
Like that interaction, I don't see as being any different than like what Pastor Matthew would do with somebody.
And that's outside your job.
Yeah.
During
So like,
business hours.
so like, what is your job, right? Like, you know, like we all work, right? We all work to make a living, but what is it that you're doing?
what about this idea? I hear this sometimes. You know, like God work, kingdom work, whatever, versus secular work. You know, I was working to pay the bills or whatever. Like, if you're doing kingdom work, is it vapor? So, like, if you take, you know, I just go back to Matthew, being a pastor, should he read Ecclesiastes chapter 1 and think that that applies to him as well as it applies to somebody selling roofs?
I have a question in response to your question.
How very Jesus of you.
And it may not, it may not be even like related, but I feel like what's in my mind is like, doesn't it say in the Bible that no matter what you do, secular or not secular, you're to do it unto the Lord?
Yep.
That's what I was gonna say, but I didn't want to sound stupid.
Way to risk it.
I mean,
That
to
sounds
me,
good.
I just feel like even if you're in a secular job, you can have kingdom impact, even if you're not working in the kingdom.
Yep.
Same thing can be said about a spiritual job, like a pastor, and they can grind and on task-oriented things and not have an impact. So in that sense, it would be meaningless, as if, they're just grinding out there, doing their time.
Yeah, because not everyone is a good pastor.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to get into good, bad, yeah.
I'm just saying.
Obviously, yeah. I like your impulse because you tried to raise a potential answer from Scripture, which is awesome. So I'm setting the stage, right? Because I want to dig in and try and see what Kohelet says. Because this is an issue that is addressed in the book of Ecclesiastes. And it was really interesting. Last week I was all pumped up to do Kohelet. I got fired up. And then afterwards I was like, oh man, did I go overboard? Because sometimes I get kind of worked up. And then afterwards I'm like, oh, I hope I didn't come off the wrong way or whatever. And so I was kind of afraid last week that I did that, got a little too passionate, because sometimes when I'm really passionate I come across as like angry or something, and I'm not trying to. And Becky said, Ecclesiastes hits home for you, which hadn't really dawned on me, but it's actually very true. Ecclesiastes hits home for me. Here's why. When I was in high school, I wanted to do God work. And I prayed really hard about what to do. And I was accepted into Bible college. And I felt like the Lord was leading me to music school. So I studied music. That's where Becky and I met. I was a music composition major. Becky's a violin major. And so I thought, I guess I'm going to become a orchestra conductor or whatever. And then you know how life works. You go down a path and then you're like, oh, I think I'm over, And but there was always this thing where I wanted to do something that mattered. And in my mind, kingdom stuff mattered way more than not kingdom stuff. So I had zero interest, for example, in business. I mean, I remember, which is just super ironic, but anyway, I remember, given what I do now, I remember being in college, and every now and then I'd meet someone, and they're like, oh, what's your major? Oh, I'm a business major. And I would just think, wow, your life must suck. Like, all I could think was how boring and like useless, whatever. And so my drive was, I want to do kingdom stuff. I want to do stuff that matters, that really matters, that has significance, that's important, that you would look at and say, this matters. And I wanted to know God, which was the driver to get into Scripture at the level that I did. because my thinking was, I want to know God. God has revealed himself in Scripture. I guess I got to get to know Scripture. And I guess if I'm going to know Scripture, I got to know the languages. Oh, well, I guess if I'm going to, then I got to know the world of the Bible so I can understand like their town stuff. And then it becomes, oh crap. Now I have to learn their languages so I can really understand their town so that I can right? And it just one thing leads to another. And fast forward, and I remember in I don't remember what year, it doesn't matter. I have, now I have a PhD in Bible. I'm a Bible professor, and at the beginning of the journey, I could hardly come up with anything that felt like it mattered more, right? I'm helping people know the Lord and walk with the Lord. And specifically as a Bible college professor, I was helping equip people to help others know and walk with the Lord, right? And so like this has to be important. And I mean, I remember praying like hard, like, Lord, please let me go a route where I can be freed up to like really study, really get to know you. Really, like I was really afraid of having a secular job and then trying to squeeze in some Bible learning on the side, right? Like I wanted to be able to really devote myself to the study, which is a big part of the reason why I became a professor, right? Because like, what do you do as a professor? You study and you teach, and so it was great. But I hit this point where, I did it, and it just felt like vapor. It felt useless, and it felt like here's how. Let me be a little more specific. It actually felt meaningless. But the reason is because you come to this realization where God doesn't need you, right? Like God can do his stuff just fine on his own, and over time I developed this image where I feel like when I'm in Scripture, I feel like a kid playing in a sandbox. You know what I mean? Like when our kids were little, we had this like ginormo sandbox that was really great for like about a year, and then the weeds took it over. But anyway, and like that's how I feel. You watch the kids, they make their stuff in the sandbox, and it's like, wow, isn't this amazing? And you're like, yeah, it's amazing. And that's how I feel like a lot of times God is, where it's like, oh, God, I want to serve you. I want to do great things for you, right? I want you to use me. I want you to minister to people through me, right? And you go and you're doing the thing. And I just hit this point where it was like I felt like a kid in a sandbox, where I'm just like playing and making a mess of stuff, and God is like doing good stuff, almost really despite me instead of like because of me, And but also there's a lot of like, there's a lot. I could go on. My point is that when I had arrived, I felt the vaporous nature of what I had done. And so Ecclesiastes does like hit home a little bit. So you see him talking about how it's all vapor, and I really had to wrestle with, wait, does that include Bible teaching? It's hard for me to come up with anything other than, of course, it includes Bible teaching, to be honest with you. But I dove into Ecclesiastes, and I see this. You can do nothing better than to just eat and drink and enjoy your work, whatever it is. And at the beginning of chapter 3, he has this really amazing, things have their seasons, right? There's a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant, a time to uproot, a time to whatever, a time to whatever. There's seasons. And I think for me, I had this drive to find the one thing. You know, what's the one thing that I'm going to do, and I'm going to do until the day I die, and it's going to matter, you know, and it's going to be significant. And so Kohelet shows up and says, oh, what do you do? It's vapor. It's not going to last. And oh, by the way, there's seasons to stuff. What? Why do you keep thinking you're going to have the thing? You know what I mean? And the seasons thing, I think, is important because there's this desire that we have when we search for wisdom to find the answer that is always going to apply no matter the circumstances. And Kohelet's like, dude, wisdom doesn't work that way. What's right today might not be right tomorrow. And like, that's okay. And so that's part of the case that he's building. And he goes on, and then you get towards the end of chapter 3. Actually, it is the end of chapter 3, verse 22. So I saw that there's nothing better for people than to enjoy their work, because that's their lot. For who can bring them to see what will happen after them? In other words, who can bring you back 100 years from now to see if what you did lasts? Nobody can do that. Okay? So just enjoy your work. And then he goes into a bunch more stuff that's really awesome. But this refrain comes... All right, I've got to cover this little section in chapter 5 because he's starting to hint at an answer. Of course, you don't know it when you're reading it, so I just sort of gave it away. But verse 6, chapter 5, verse 6, don't let your mouth lead you into sin, and don't protest to the messenger, my vow is me. He's talking about vows. Why should God be angry at what you say and destroy the work of your hands? Much dreaming and many words are meaningless. Therefore, fear God. Now, why would he talk about vows? Basically, when you make a vow to God, just do it. All right? Don't just say, "Ooh, oops, my vow was a mistake." You know, you make a vow to God, do it. Why would you want to get into a situation where God's going to destroy the work of your hands because you made a vow and then you wouldn't fulfill it? And so a whole lot of dreaming, you know, a whole lot of, I'm going to do this, it's going to be awesome, whatever, you know, without really any intention to follow through. That's vaporous. So, fear God. How on earth does he go from, if you make a vow, fulfill it, to, so therefore, fear God? What? Like, what's he getting at? Yeah. I think what he's starting to hint at is, how about instead of you having a bunch of dreams and then being like, God, how about this, and go for it, how about you let it flow the other way?
So now I think we say what it is?
Sure, it's the difference between, Lord, I want to go to seminary so I can learn your word. And the Lord says, all right, go for it. Versus, all right, Lord, well, I have no clue what's next. And the Lord says, hey, why don't you be open to coaching? All right. That's the difference. Right? And when we're young, by the way, Kohelet is very much the progression from young to old. Very much, right? And when I'm doing Kohelet with like college kids, it's a very different conversation than with this room, and this room's a little weird because it's kind of mixed, which is fun, right? Because I remember I talked about Kohelet somewhere. It might have been at Waypoint. I don't remember.
Oh, yes, you did.
Did I?
Oh, yes, you did.
Amanda remembers.
What's that?
Sorry.
It was really,
It was very, very, yes, very depressing. One of the older generation was like, that is the best sermon I've ever heard in my entire whole life.
an older person?
Yeah.
Okay,
An older grumpy person.
that's funny.
Right. But
A lot of
anyway,
people
so
were
yeah,
kinda
it's
sad.
probably very
Yeah.
cool for me to see that progression.
Smile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I think those were dark times too.
well, anyway,
Yes, it was.
let's not worry about that.
Yeah.
So Ben came up to me. Ben is our son, he's 21 now. He came up to me after that sermon and he was like, so should I not, whatever. And I was like, dude, man, go have your adventures, right? Go for it. Go hard at it. Oh, I remember what he said. Should I not want to do great things for God? And I was like, look, you're 20, go for it. Because it's part of the process, right? And that's part of the seasons thing. There's a season for this, there's a season for that. There's a season to like, I'm gonna go do great things for God, right? And then there's a season, usually later, where you're like, well, that was dumb. But you don't, do you remember when we talked about the Psalms and there's orientation, disorientation, reorientation? You don't start at reorientation, okay? You don't start at doing great things for God is dumb. But you'll get there.
That's awesome.
You'll get there.
It's like
Right.
a maturation.
Yes, right? Yeah.
That's a good
Yeah. And so one dude I read talking about Ecclesiastes, he said, Ecclesiastes teaches, for the young people, go do your competition, right? You want to be the best at what you want to do. You want to climb the corporate ladder. You want to do all this stuff, right? Go for it. Absolutely.
Have fun.
Have fun. And then later, after you've spent yourself on that, invest in relationships. Because that's what's going to matter. Kind of a thing. He said it much more eloquently. But my point is that it's not, this was the conversation with Ben. No, Ben, I wasn't trying to say don't want to do great things for God. I'm just saying that there's going to come a point where it's going to shift and you're going to start like, well, I don't want to do great things for God. I want God to do great things through me. And that's going to go on for a while. And then it's probably, if you hang in there, that's probably going to shift again at some point where you're like, I don't give a crap. Great, not great. Where does this even come from? How about, and as you mature, it's there a desire for obedience, period. And so I think that's what he's starting to hint at here with these vows. I'm going to do great things for God kind of stuff. And then it's like, hey, I got an idea. How about instead of you coming up with the great things you're going to do for God and promising him that you're going to do them, and then like now you're in this whole loop with vows and everything? How about you just ditch all that and fear God? Okay? That's what he's starting to hint at. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. So it's really a fantastic moment. All right, but we're progressing. All right, and he does more stuff. I want to look at chapter 9. Chapter 9. Verse 7. We get this refrain thing that we've been getting again, but this one, it's a little bit different. So, go, eat your food with gladness, and drink your wine with a joyful heart, for God has already approved of what you do. Oh, that's an interesting line, yeah? God has already approved of what you do?
Praise the Lord.
And then look at this next line. Always be clothed in white. I'm just looking around the room. A couple of you are biblical. Anyway, most of us tonight are not biblical. And always anoint your head with oil. I don't know of anyone. Enjoy life with your wife, whom you love, all the days of this vaporous life that God has given you. It's not meaningless life, okay? It's vapor. It's here and gone. You can't grasp it. It doesn't have substance that you can grasp onto that's not like, it's going to just slip away. It's vapor. All right? So enjoy life with your wife whom you love. By the way, this is cast as like, I should have mentioned this before, I'm sorry. It is excessively normal for ancient Near Eastern wisdom literature to be cast as a father instructing a son. Okay, so it's going to say, so it's gendered in that way, because that's the trope, what they do, okay? So that's why it says, enjoy life with your wife, as opposed to enjoy life with your spouse, okay? Because you got to think in terms of daddy talking to son. Make sense? All right, so enjoy life with your wife, whom you love, all the days of this vaporous life that God has given you under the sun, all of your vaporous days. For this is your lot in life, and in your toilsome labor under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. Right? That's what you were referencing earlier. And Paul picks up, I think it's Paul, reiterates this. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. For in the realm of the dead, where you're going, there's neither working, nor planning, nor knowledge, or wisdom. All right. So he's reiterating this, go and eat and drink and just find satisfaction in your work, right? But he's playing with it a little bit. Don't get tripped up by the wear white and have oil on your head. Okay, remember, we're talking about imagery. So what does that image evoke?
Be holy.
Being pure.
That's interesting. That's so interesting, because that would not have dawned on me at all as even a possibility. Wow. That's fascinating. That's really fascinating. No, the reason it's fascinating is...
Are you being sarcastic?
Yeah, it's like.
No, I'm not being sarcastic. That's genuinely fascinating to me, because once you said it, I could see how you would get there, and that is our culture, not their culture. And so it was just fascinating to me, because it didn't even dawn on me to go that direction. All right? This is like the opposite of mourning. I don't mean AM. I mean, you're not sad, right? Don't go around, oh, woe is me. Okay? Go around like there's joy in life. Okay? That's what he's getting at with the wear white and anoint your head. It's like, yeah. It's
Is it like in the New Testament they're talking about fasting, like don't let people know that you're fasting kind of like thought process, like don't like wear rags and like make sure you clean yourself and I mean, I know
Yeah.
that's not like a
Yeah,
fasting,
it's,
but
yeah, because
that
the
same-
point there is don't put on a show of being sad,
Yeah,
right? And that's, the point here though, is where it's different is it's not put on a show of being sad, it's just don't be. It's like, don't treat, but, alright. Because he called your life vaporous twice, right?
yeah.
So do you see the temptation to slip into like mourning mode? And he's saying, guys, this isn't cause for moping about. That's what he's getting at. The wear white and anoint your. Does that make sense?
Yes.
What
All right.
version is that?
What?
What version is that? Because mine doesn't say it like that.
What do you have?
It says, wear fancy clothes with a splash of cologne.
For real?
Yeah.
That is outstanding. Is that Phillips?
There's
is it the
my
message?
theology.
What do you got?
NIV.
No, it's
No,
it's
Oh,
NLT.
this is that one.
Oh, New Living Translation. I worked for the Old Testament editor of the NLT, so I'm on board. That was perfect. Yeah. I have today's New International Version, which was a freebie at some point. All right. So he's saying, like, look, go eat, drink, find satisfaction in your work. You know, this life's gonna be over before you know it. Don't take that as go and play woe is me. Like, get at your splash and go hit the town, you know, or whatever. All right, so that's what he's getting at. But the thing that he really adds here is enjoy life with your wife, whom you love, all the days of this meaningless, vaporous life that God has given you under the sun. So he's working. He's starting to work in this theme that this is part of where that one. I'm pretty sure the one that I told you about, who made the comment about go climb the corporate ladder when you're young, but like, you know, eventually it's gonna shift, and I think this is part of what Kohelet's doing here, right? It's like, enjoy, he's introducing this thread. Enjoy life with your wife. You just take joy in the relationship. We need to, I'm gonna fast forward to chapter 12 because, let's go back to 11. I'm gonna start in 11:7. Okay? So he started with this enjoy life with your wife, and I want to combine that with some stuff here to make a point. Light is sweet, and it pleases the eyes to see the sun. However many years anyone may live, let them enjoy them all. But let him remember the days of darkness, for there will be many, and everything to come is vapor. You who are young, okay, you who are young, be happy while you are young. And let your hearts give you joy in the days of your youth. Follow the ways of your heart, and whatever your eyes see. But know that for all these things, God will bring them to light. God will bring them into judgment. In other words, hey, go for it, right? And this is like, this is what I was talking about before. You know, when I was young, it was like, I want to do great things for God. You know, and what Kohelet is saying is, hey, go for it. Whatever's in your heart, go for it. Okay, does that make sense? You know, now remember that God's watching. You know, it's not like you just name any not God honoring thing that might be in your heart and go for it. God already approves. No, right? Like, keep it in balance. But he's like, whatever you're, and this was part of the thing with my son, you know, when he's like, so I shouldn't want to do great things. It's like, whoa, you know, go do your adventures, because that's in your heart, and that's where you're at in life. Make sense? So then, banish anxiety from your heart and cast off the troubles of your body, for youth and vigor are vapor. It's not going to last. Part of the message is, no matter how old or young you currently are, treat yourself as young, because it's only getting older. Right? Like there's an inherent, like, okay, like I'm 49, okay? I'm not quite as spry as when I was 25, but I can still get around. So, like, my mindset is enjoy it while I'm young. You know, because I'm watching my parents break down, and that's like, you know, I'm going to enjoy the fact that I can go an hour and a half without having to pee. This is a big deal. You know, so no matter how old or young you are, enjoy how young you are. That's what he's getting at. I think it's fantastic. But do you see how there's an element of like, whatever's on your heart, go for it. Eat, drink, and find satisfaction in whatever it was that you went for. And it's okay. And there's going to be seasons. You just bear in mind that God's paying attention. God cares. Right? So, fear him. Make sense so far?
Yes.
All right. So, remember your Creator. This is chapter 12. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come and the years approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars grow dark and the clouds return after the rain, so on and so forth. So there's this encouragement to remember God as you go after what's in your heart, and you eat and drink and you enjoy your labor. Remember him basically before you die. This is the poetry there. And then Kohelet wraps up, basically bookends his stuff, right? Because he started with vapor. Everything is vapor. And he ends with vapor, everything is vapor. Make sense? Okay. Now, hopefully the way I've talked about it, you're not wanting to dismiss everything in Ecclesiastes, but if you just read through it and you're constantly running into this meaningless, everything's meaningless, and there's a temptation to just ditch what the preacher says, what Kohelet says. And the narrator is aware of that. And so when we get the narrator, this is verse 9, the narrator is going to start by saying, don't just throw what this dude is saying away. Okay? So not only was Kohelet wise, this is chapter 12, verse 9. Not only was Kohelet wise, but also he imparted knowledge to the people. He pondered and searched out and set in order many proverbs. Kohelet searched to find just the right words, and what he wrote is upright and true. Okay? So the narrator comes in and says, oh, you just read Kohelet telling you that's vapor. And the temptation is to be like, forget this guy. He's a cynic. We can ignore him. And the narrator comes in and says, don't ignore Kohelet. What he said is true. Does that make sense? Okay. So, the verse 11. The words of the wise are like goads. That's the thing you put on an ox to make them go in a straight line. They're collected sayings like firmly embedded nails given by one shepherd. Whatever, translation issue. Be warned, my son, of anything in addition to that. Of making many books there is no end, and much study wearies the body. True. Verse 13. So now that we've heard Kohelet, now that we've heard this whole thing, here's the conclusion, okay? This is one of those moments where it's kind of bad literature in a way, well, at least for our standards, but I don't know if any of you ever heard those like Aesop's Fables or that kind of stuff growing up, and you'd hear this story, and then at the end there'd be this, now here's the moral of the story, right? And then you get into high school and college literature, and your profs are like, don't ever do that, right? That's a sign of horrendous literature when you just spoon feed the moral of the story like that, right? Well, here you're being spoon fed the moral of the story, okay? So the narrator says, now that all has been heard, here's the conclusion of the matter. That's his way of saying, here's the moral of the story. Fear God and keep his commands, for that's what it means to be human. That's it.
There you go.
Fear God and keep his commands, for that's what it is to be human. Okay? How am I getting that translated? Your translation probably says this is like the whole job of what do you have? The whole duty. All right. So they're supplying the word duty because basically what the Hebrew says is this is it's really bad grammar if you just try and translate it straight into English, and so they're trying to just smooth it out for you, okay? But the gist of what it's saying is this is what it is to be human, okay? This is what it means to be human. Fear God and keep his commands. That's your job. All right. So, Kohelet hinted at that, right? We saw it. Well, he said it. He didn't hint at it. He said it. But it wasn't like, he didn't make this ginormous thing about it. There's a couple of things that are kind of interesting. Some people think Kohelet is Solomon. We talked about that last week. There's good reason to think that it was Solomon, son of David, a king in Jerusalem, accrued wealth, etc. There's reason to think it's not Solomon. People will point to the line about I was whatever greater than any king who ruled over Jerusalem before me or whatever. At the end of the day, I do not care if you think Kohelet was Solomon or not. However, what I do care about is that if you do think it's Solomon, then you need to understand that the way the book is constructed is a critique of Solomon. And if it is Solomon, then what some very clever narrator has done is taken all of the stuff that Solomon said and then affirmed this is true, and then said, yeah, but here's what it is to be human, fear God and keep his commands. Under the assumption that you know full well that that's what he did not do. All right? So if Kohelet is Solomon, then it's trustworthy. What he said is trustworthy and wise. but there's an acknowledgement that he didn't do his own thing. Okay? Or it could not be Solomon. Doesn't matter. All right? But the only reason I make the point out of that is it just sometimes we get clumsy with calling Solomon the author of stuff or whatever. And it's like, guys, Solomon did not finish strong. Anyway, so that's for another time. All right, so remember your creator. All right, so when I was driving home last week, daughter raised a very interesting question. Sorry, is it okay if I quote you? Because I just did in front of you.
Too late now.
And yeah, I know. And I did warn you. Yeah, so. Basically you were like, because all we got to last week was, just eat and drink, enjoy your work. And basically you were like, correct me if I screwed this up, but basically the gist of what you said was, any go and do whatever work and it doesn't account for who you are or what you're good at or whatever, just makes no sense to me. Yeah? Did I get it right? So it was this awesome moment of all right, I hear what you said, but that was dumb, kind of a thing. and I was like, whoa. Oh. And I was like, well, I mentioned that we didn't get to the narrator's conclusion, and you got to have that part, And then her response was, well, I think as the daughter of the teacher, I have special privilege. So spill your guts, basically, is what she said. So that was kind of fun, a fun moment. But we started by talking about is one type of work inherently more valuable than some other type of work? And I would contend that Kohelet's answer is yes and no. And here's what I mean by that. If God told you to go sell roofs or roofs? Roofs? Roofs.
Roofs, that's a good question.
If God told you to go sell roofs, then there's nothing more inherently valuable that you could be doing. Period. This is why the call is to fear God, do what he says. Just fear God and do what he says. So is being a Bible professor, you're teaching people about God. That's gotta be important. Insofar as I'm fearing the Lord and doing what he says, it's super important. And then when I turn around and I'm consulting in a business about whatever comes up, the Lord told me, as best I know, the Lord told me to be open to coaching. So when I'm with some industrial construction guy talking about his sales funnel, in my mind, it's just as important as what I'm doing here tonight. Because the message of Kohelet is do what God says. And if you don't have some clear thing that if you're not sitting there saying, I really believe, I've prayed and I've never had that burning bush moment, go do this thing, right? Which, by the way, I hadn't until the fall of 2020, right? Until that story I told about I'm out jogging on the trail and the prompting of the Spirit is be open to coaching, and that was a Friday, and first client signed up on Monday. Like that whole thing, that's the first time in my life I ever had like a I want you to go do this in terms of job, you know. I remember when we were launching the seminary, I was talking to a mentor and she said, so is the Lord calling you to launch a seminary? And I remember the question like just threw me off. Because I felt like there was, I don't know if there was or wasn't, I never clarified with her, but I felt like there was like this implied, unless God like said, go and do this thing, like you're not called and you're, I don't know, there was, somehow it kind of hit me the wrong way. But it was actually a really, really good thing because it solidified some thinking that I have about call. And call is more often than not a function of wisdom than it is a function of a burning bush moment. Okay? And so it was like, so the conversation was, you know, well, are you called to launch a seminary? Well, yeah, I am. But did God like show up and say, hey, go launch that seminary? No. Well, then how can you say you're called? Well, because calling is a function of wisdom. And you track, right? You track the progression, like this is the logical next thing, or whatever. And anyway, the thing I'm trying to get at is you fear God, you do what he says, and in those times where there's no clear cut, go sell roofs, which by the way is the norm, then you while you are young, you be happy and you let your heart give you joy and you follow the ways of your heart and whatever your eyes see, knowing that God's gonna like, he's watching, he's gonna hold you to account, you know, so, right? But it's whatever your hand finds to do, go do it. Am I making any sense?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, the value is not in the type of work. The value is in obedience to the Lord. And we serve a God who is, we talked about this in Job, right? We serve a God who is administrating a complex kingdom, the world, right? So, think about it this way. I don't know, that might be too much of a digression. How are we doing so far? Yes.
So, how do you know that you're being obedient? If you don't, like, you know, God's not always on this.
Yeah. What do you know?
As you were talking.
Oh, I'm sorry, hold on one second. I want to give the opportunity. What do you know?
I know what like feelings I get in my heart.
Okay. What else do you know in terms of obeying God?
I know that, like biblically, if I spend time with him, if I build a relationship with him, that eventually, in some way, shape, or form, and in his time, he'll reveal it to me.
Okay, maybe. But what do you know? There are things that I believe you know that you should obey. Yeah? Like?
Honesty, love one another.
Oh, okay. Brilliant. But what I'm trying to get at is, in the absence of some prompting of the Spirit to go into Baker's, do the revealed will of God. Man, part of the revealed will of God is eat and drink and find joy and satisfaction in your work. Whatever it is. This, by the way, is this is like this is how wisdom works. This is wisdom. Do you remember when I introduced wisdom, I said wisdom from a biblical perspective is basically like figure out how God wired the world and then act accordingly. Right? So you figure out how God wired the world. And you act accordingly. So he wired, there's things he's revealed, right? He's wired marriage to work where marriage works better without adultery, for example, right? You know, and you look at that and you're like, well, you know, that's obvious. Well, but it's the revealed will of God, right? Look at the stuff in Torah that we talked about. Just think about the stuff that you know. So there's plenty to choose from in terms of fearing God and obeying his commands. Now, wisdom is figure out how he's wired the world and act accordingly. And part of that is that at any time, God can upend the order. Okay? This is why I say calling by default is a wisdom issue. It's only when that gets upended that it's a burning bush issue. Do you get what I mean by burning bush? Burning bush, I just mean the Spirit prompted, go and, you know, whatever, right? Go free my people, you know, lead my people out of Egypt, right? Like that's, you know, for me, I've had two of them. Write fiction and be open to coaching. And both of them are recent. The default is you act in accord with wisdom. All right? How we doing? Okay. Part of wisdom is let me say it this way. Wisdom is figuring out how God set things up, right? Figuring out how God wired the world to work. I think the way I said it last week, just figuring out how things work and acting accordingly, okay? Guys, you are part of creation. Okay? This was the conversation with daughter last week in the car when she's like, just go and do work that doesn't like fit you makes no sense to me. You have to account for who you are. Yes. The reason is because wisdom is figuring out how things work, figuring out how God wired things to work. Oh, by the way, you're one of those things. Figuring out how God wired you and acting accordingly. Calling is almost always a wisdom issue, not a burning bush. Burning bush is the exception, not the norm.
Yeah.
Okay? So, there are some people who are just wired to sell stuff, man. Good on you. Good on you. You serve a God who administers a complex kingdom. And roofs are part of that kingdom.
And I'd say you could talk about Chris, the HVAC journey. I mean, this is a really big subject, I think, for me, for us, but like it's so true, right? That somebody who sells roofs, somebody who does I don't know why I'm thinking of that, Mary Kay, that's really weird. Somebody who works with students, right? And we met this guy named Chris when we were, our good friend Chris, and he went through seminary, he was in Cox Communication, I think it was. Climbing telephone poles, so good with people, like off the charts people skills. And he decided with Eric, I'm gonna join seminary with you, I'm gonna do it. And he did an MDiv with Eric, and best friends, it was good times, right? And then the journey of like 10, 12, I don't know, years, 10, 12, 15 years of knowing them and just kind of sharing failures after failure, after this church plant try, after this thing, after this ministry opportunity, for both ends, for both of us, and I mean, his family and our family. And, jobs that were like, this is probably, you're one of 3, man, Eric, and then nope, and no way, Zondervan, that's,
Okay, time out, because you're mixing our story and Chris's
Sorry,
story.
Chris and
For
Chris.
the sake of people
Right.
understanding
Sorry.
what's going on.
Yeah, so
let's
Chris
handle
was
Chris
like,
first.
yeah, he was great. He's been great at with his hands. His lawn is HGTV, I swear you worthy. Like, it is unreal. Build a deck in a day. We are.
That took a whole weekend.
Like, it's crazy, right? He also, while going to seminary, and he was good at seminary, and it was great. He loved it. Did try to plant a church in there. He had a job at a church in there. He was a chaplain for a while at a hospital. All of them were like eating him alive from the inside out. On paper, right? You would think this is gonna work. This is, He went back to HVAC, and he
Came alive.
came alive. He's killing it. He is, I bet he's sharing the gospel every day. Like, it is unreal watching him throughout that whole thing, right? The journey. Me and Amy, his wife, we laugh. Watching what just happened. Okay, we went to seminary, all right. And now he's back in HVAC and working with his hands and sharing the gospel in ways that no other HVAC person could ever, do. And he loves his work, like, right? He is as happy as he's ever been. He lives in Chicago, but anyway.
I'd like to take a few minutes, a little break. My eyes are I'm starting to do this. Real quick on on Ecclesiastes. I think if I was to try and summarize, fear God, do what He says. It's the path to life. In the meantime, yes, He's put this thing in you where you want to do something that matters. You want to do something of significance, something that'll last, whatever, however that registers for you. God put that in you. But knowing what that is, He hides from you. You don't know. And He does that as a mechanism to drive you to Him and to trust Him. So enjoy your youth, however but there's differing amounts of it left for differing people, right? But enjoy it.
In my plan.
And along the way, there's nothing better than to eat and drink and just find satisfaction in the daily toil.
That's not.
All right? And the thing that I would add is, remember, wisdom is figuring out, learning, studying how God wired the world and acting in accord. And you're part of creation. So figuring out how He wired you to work and acting accordingly. It's just part of the deal. Make sense?
Yes.
Any questions?
I have
Yeah.
a question. Last week you mentioned like a lot of times Christians try to, when they're talking to unsaved people, they say, you know, your life is meaningless or whatever. I can't remember the
So
exact.
you need to find Jesus.
Yeah, so find Jesus and then you'll start finding fulfillment.
Yeah.
And why would you, I mean, I guess for me, it gives, I don't know, maybe I've been witnessing wrong to people, but to me, it's the only, it's the only thing that brings purpose and meaning in my life personally.
Yeah.
Like it's pre-Christ or without Christ, there's no meaning. And it's not even that you find meaning in your work, but it gives you a reason to live life. Like it gives you an end game, I guess. So what would you say that, like, I don't know, I guess can you further explain why you said that's a common thing that you would, how you wouldn't share the gospel?
I think what I was trying to pick on is the I'm not finding satisfaction. Here's what I was trying to pick on. When somebody expresses that everything is vapor, and they do it in their own words, right? They have zero knowledge of Kohelet. They're just explaining this phenomenon in their life.
Yeah.
Don't turn around and say, it'll have significance if you find Jesus. Because now you're not being biblical anymore. Because what's biblical is, yeah, you're right, it is vapor.
Yeah.
Okay? And so what you did and the way you phrased it is just the way you described the conversations that you have.
Yeah.
What you described was finding meaning in Christ.
Right. Yeah. So you're saying, telling them that their work or their thing that they're saying is vapor, don't say, well, if you come to Jesus, that specific thing is going to be all good.
Solid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't give this idea that once you've found Jesus,
Yeah.
everything you do in life is like, don't give the impression that if you find Jesus, you're no longer going to feel the vapor.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to argue against.
That makes sense, yeah.
Okay? You're still going to feel the vapor.
Or there's a song going through my head right now.
What is it? Go ahead and sing. He sings when you sing. Give you Pastor Tremaine.
I'm in the same generation as you, so yeah.
We can give you a mic, this one.
Yeah. Anything else
Yeah.
on Ecclesiastes? Do you see how vapor is good news?
Yeah.
It's good news. You can relax. You don't have to figure out what the thing is going to be. Right, you just...
Never made that noise.
Back to Seattle.
Flashbacks. Verbo.
Okay. So the other request I had was to talk about Genesis 9 a little bit. This request came from Becky, and Becky might jump in along the way.
Cool. Maybe.
I'm saying this is the thing this is a thing that he took the our town thing, a lot of our town. Never mind. Go ahead.
Yeah.
All right. So Genesis 9 takes place after the flood story, and Noah gets off the boat. This is Genesis 9, verse 8. Then God said to Noah and his sons with him, they're off the boat at this point. I now establish my covenant with you. Covenant, it means treaty. Actually, covenant doesn't necessarily exactly mean treaty, but the Hebrew word being translated covenant means treaty. So covenant is a word we don't use a lot. Like we use covenant in like a wedding ceremony sometimes. It's like the only thing I can think of where so like why we insist on continuing to use covenant, I don't know. It's treaty, all right? So I now establish my treaty with you and with your descendants after you and with every living creature that was with you, the birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals, all those that came out of the ark with you, every living creature on earth. I establish my treaty with you. Here's the treaty. Here's the term of the treaty. Never again will all life be destroyed by a flood. And never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth. And then God said, here's a sign, an emblem, if you will, of the treaty that I'm making between me and you and every living creature with you. A treaty for all generations to come. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, my bow in the clouds. The Hebrew, it just has the word bow. There's not a special word for rainbow. So it's referring to a rainbow, but it's bow in the clouds, which is a rainbow. So I've set my bow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the treaty between me and the earth. Whenever I bring clouds over the earth and the bow appears in the clouds, I will remember my treaty between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life. Whenever the bow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind on the earth. Summary statement, God said to Noah, this is the sign of the treaty I have established between me and all life on the earth. I have a memory of having heard this story being in 8th grade. I was out playing golf at Berkshire Country Club in Indianapolis, Indiana, and the clouds were rolling in. And I remember thinking, well, I know I won't be destroyed in a flood that will destroy all earth, all life on earth, because that's, what this says, right? I was thinking of this story. I was like, okay, so, but I remember thinking, well, that's kind of dumb. Like, here I am, out on the golf course. I mean, I could die. So anyway, here's this 8th grader out on the golf course thinking about how useless this sign of the covenant is. Because when am I ever going to be in a scenario where I am somehow like comforted by the fact that, well, you might die, but it's not going to be a flood like Noah's flood. And so I just, anyway. So that was kind of stuck in the back of my head. And then when I was in seminary, I came across an article by Jim Hoffmeyer that my daughter knows. She went to Egypt with him, where he made some comments about bows in the ancient Near East and how there might be some implications for what is going on with the bow in the clouds in Genesis 9. And I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. And so I started digging in. I wrote a paper, actually, for one of his classes when I was in seminary. And then I had the opportunity, some years later, to turn that into an academic, quality paper and presented at St. Andrews in Scotland. I went to Scotland, and there was a Genesis and Christian theology thing, basically, just to try and imagine 50 nerds, like just think academics. But find that image of some college professor you've met where you're just like, wow. You know, at 50 of them in a room. And anyway, it was a lot of fun. And I remember at one point I was sitting in this room where this thing is going on, this room full of academics talking about Genesis and Christian theology, and the road was to my left, so there was these big windows, you know, the floor to ceiling windows on this wall to my left, and out there was, you know, sidewalk, the road, and then hole number 18 of St. Andrews. And so, you know, when the academic nerds were boring, I would watch the golfers get up on the Sowick Bridge, the little bridge, the famous little bridge on hole 18 of St. Andrews, you know, and the caddies snap the, you know, I'm just watching all this go on. But I do remember part of what went through my mind while all that was happening was nothing that we are doing is by the way, I think is, hopefully you'll hear some Ecclesiastes in this. Part of what was going through my mind sitting in that room is, here's 50 nerds, and we're all like, you know, geeking out about this stuff, and nothing that we do in this room is going to have any impact on the people out there. And that was heartbreaking enough. But then what went through my mind is, and nobody in this room cares. Which wasn't entirely true, because this is where I met the person that I mentioned when I mentioned a book, Contradictions, in the book of Proverbs. I actually met him at this conference. He cares. But, you know, for the most part, it's academic nerds doing academic nerdy stuff on a prestigious academic campus, right? It's not overly concerned about how what we're doing in the room might impact people out there. And so I didn't know it at the time, but I think God was forming a lot of the impetus to launch a seminary in that conference. Because all I could think about was how the stuff that we're doing could really have a positive impact, help people understand Scripture, which in turn would help them understand the Lord, help ground Scripture in reality, because at the time, the winds were sort of changing culturally to where young people were leaving the church in droves, and a huge part of the thing that would get talked about in the research is the detachment of theological things from like everyday from the world, you know. So a lot of what I did was sort of reattach biblical things to the real world. And this is an example of that. But this comes out of what I gave a paper on at St. Andrews in whatever year that was. So we're going to talk about bows. All right, you know, bows. This right here is a line drawing of a cuneiform tablet in Sumerian. The only reason I have this is our earliest written record of a bow. Because this is a text denoting donations of bows and arrows and quivers to the royal family. So it's pretty cool. Gishbana, this word right here is bow. Gish, that's just, don't worry about it, Bana. So same here, more bows. This is the number, you know, so many bows, so many arrows, etc. All right, next one. This is the earliest, I think maybe the earliest. That text was maybe about 2100 BC. This is more like 2300, so it's a little earlier. But you can see Naram Sin, that's the king here. He's badass. He is beat up on his enemies, right? He is trampling his enemies, iconographically, you know. And he's holding his bow. This is the earliest picture, I guess you would say, of a bow. This is about 2300 BC. And interestingly, it's a recurve bow. What I mean is, it's not just one piece of wood, like an English longbow, a long piece of yew, that when you pull back, it makes a straight curve. Do you see how we call it recurve? Because it's curved, but then it comes back. Do you see what I mean? And that's high tech, man, at that time. Yeah. High tech recurve bow. So, which is done by, I mean, essentially, it's a composite of wood and bone, and sinew are the primary things that they figured out how to get it to work. Anyway, I digress. Next one is just to show that that's a big thing, because there's a person. Right? Sometimes when you see the picture, you're like, oh, is it like this big? No, it's huge. But anyway, that's the only reason for that picture, is just to say, hey, that thing's kind of big. And here's a close-up of the guy. This is Naram Sin. And again, you can see the recurve in the bow. And pull his head down a little bit. Notice the hat he's wearing. Okay? Do you see horns? Yeah. All right? In ancient Near Eastern iconography is just the big word we use to mean pictures. In ancient Near Eastern iconography, when you see somebody wearing horns on their hat, it means divinity. Okay? Now, scholars debate, was Naram Sin deified? Or is it just saying he was like touched by divinity or whatever? You know, I don't care how you take the debate. Here's why I'm bringing it up. Anyone know Moses, when he comes down from Mount Sinai, how he's described in Exodus?
His eyes were glowing.
His face is glowing, and
Is he hovering a little bit?
he has horns.
Oh, dang. Good. Wow.
He has horns. And was he hovering? That's what's being referenced. He
Float?
Honestly, if you like just Google it sometime, you can do it right now. Old school statues, like Middle Ages statues of Moses, there's little horns. You're like, what? Why does the dude have little? It looks gross. Like, is he half fawn or something? Not that kind of fawn, but like a mythical fawn, you know, with his little horns. But that's because of the description, which anyway, I don't remember exactly where it is. You'll have to look it up. All right, but Moses had horns because he had an encounter with Yahweh. All right, next, let's see how bows are used in the ancient Near East. Well, here's a surprise. They're used for hunting. Wow. So this is Egyptian imagery of bows being used in hunting. Next one. Bows are used in warfare. Also, big surprise. Notice the Egyptian bows are different in terms of their construction than what we were seeing before. But off to war with our bows. Next. Oh, this one's nice. Here's Pharaoh. He's got his bow. Notice can you see what he's standing on? People. He's standing on his enemies. All right. The historic enemies. There were 9 historic enemies of Egypt, and so it would be normal to depict 9 people that he's standing on to represent the 9 different historic enemies. And sometimes those enemies were referred to as the 9 bows. So, a couple other notes. Notice that he's drawn the bow all the way back here, right? And Matthew, you do bows, right? Do you ever draw all the way back here?
No.
That would be dumb, right?
We don't have to.
We know that they drew to the ear just like you would with a modern bow. We know that from instructional texts. Scholars refer to this as heroic overdraw. Basically, it's a way of symbolically saying Pharaoh is better than you. So
Looks like he's doing it behind his back too.
yeah, he's amazing.
Like this.
Yeah, he's like Legolas got nothing on this guy. Right? That's part of what's going on there. One other point. This is an utter digression from the bow, but it's interesting. Do you see the little bird above him? Okay.
It's a big bird.
It looks like a turkey. It looks like a turkey. Does it look like a vulture?
Turkey vulture.
Turkey, vulture, some sort of thing like that. Okay. It was normal in the iconography to have this bird, this vulture, as like a, it's like a protector. It's an image for protector. The reason I mention this is there's a translation issue with the line usually gets translated you will mount up like on wings like eagles, blah blah blah. In all your English stuff, they always do eagle. The reason is because in our culture, eagle is majestic and awesome and woohoo. It's not an eagle. That's what it is. Right? An ancient Israelite would not think of a bald eagle with an American flag hanging out of his mouth. An ancient Israelite would think of that. All right. Anyway, it's an aside. It's not really.
What's the basketball thing they're carrying?
I don't know. It just looks like a
Fan.
My guess is a fan, but I don't know for sure.
Eagles are still cooler.
All right.
Actually supposed to be a vulture, like how did
Yeah,
they get
otherwise
like a
I'll
pass
be really
to put
poorly.
eagle instead? Is it just because like the imagery that it, or the feeling that it evokes, like you're talking about in some?
Yeah, so it depends on who's translating. They might be just going with the feeling it evokes, and the eagle works better. That's one possibility. Probably the least likely. Another possibility is a long time ago when it started getting translated and became famous, the translators didn't know, and so it's like the word covenant. Why do your translations keep saying covenant even though nobody knows what covenant means? Because it's been translated that way for so long that if you suddenly put in the word treaty, then people are going to get bent out of shape. Like, what is this? It's supposed to be a covenant, and a covenant is a promise from God, and they get all worked up and they burn your Bible and send it back to you in the mail. That's another issue. You think I'm kidding? I am not. Third issue is oftentimes with animals, it is very difficult to know exactly how to translate it. In other words, like Sumerian has gazillions of words that are snakes. And we just always translate snake because to try and match up, this is exactly this kind of.
Like a python versus
Yeah, you're like, I can tell it's a snake.
Gotcha.
So there's some of that going on where it's like, well, we know it's a bird and it seems like pretty majestic because the verse is awesome, so I guess we'll go with eagle. That's what's going on. So, yeah.
Do you know what the string is between his legs?
That's a crack in the thing. Disregard is what I'm trying to say. All right, on to the next. Whoa, where are we going?
Oh,
You're a big guy?
You wanted the words, huh?
Yeah.
Kurt. Now you want a picture.
All right. So bows appear in treaties, and So can you go up just a little bit so I can see? Sorry, up the other way. I wanted to make sure this was yeah, okay. So this is Neo-Assyrian, which obviously because of that, but
Totally.
so this is a text from an Assyrian treaty. May all the gods who are called by name in this treaty tablet break your bow and subject you to your enemy. May they turn over the bow in your hands and make your chariots run backwards. The reason I have this up here is it's bow appearing as a treaty object, which is interesting. Because in Genesis 9, a bow is appearing as a treaty object. So I find that fascinating. But the other thing is that notice that bow is being used as an image of your strength, your military strength, your power, whatever. Okay? So you got to understand bow, image of strength, military strength, power, whatever. Make sense? All right, next one. I think is the Sapphire Treaty next. Oh, we're still in Assyrian treaties. May all the gods who are called by name in this treaty tablet break your bow and subject you to your enemy. This is the same thing.
Yeah.
All right, on to the next. Oh, this one's so good. This is a king bragging, and basic. Well, he was overwhelmed by the Melamu is the Akkadian word being translated terror-inspiring sheen. He was so overwhelmed by my Melamu that he broke his bow and submitted to me. So we don't know if they would actually break their bow as part of a submission kind of ritual or a way of like saying I surrender. Would they actually break the bow, or is this just figurative? Don't know in this instance, although we will see an interesting picture a little bit later. But anyway, bow again used as this symbol of your military strength or whatever. Next. Now this is another treaty, and apparently what they're doing is they have bows and arrows, and they're symbolically breaking them as part of the treaty. Okay. Which, by the way, you get that in Genesis 15, where God says he's going to make a treaty with Abraham, and so he tells Abraham to get animals and cut them in half, all right, breaking the animals. It's a similar thing, but in this instance, it's bows and arrows. Just as the bow and these arrows are broken, so may Inurta and Hadad, those are deities, big bad deities, break the bow of Matiel, that's a person, and the bow of his officials, his magnates. Whether or not they actually did it, I mean, they probably did because of the text, but they're doing a treaty, and basically what they're saying is if you break the terms of the treaty, then may your bow, your military strength, be broken just like this bow, an actual bow. Make sense? Pretty cool. Fun stuff. All right, on to the next. This is what I was talking about just a second ago, where there's a picture. You have an Assyrian beaten up on an Elamite, and he's cutting his bow as a sign of surrender. All right? We know it's an Elamite because of this shape on the bow right here. That's an Elamite bow. It's called a duckbill bow. Anyway, it's kind of cool. All right, on to the next. Oh, now it starts to get good. All right. This is I can double dip here. Do you remember? That's a lion. All right. What were you cracking jokes about the fawn? Is that what you're laughing at?
No, we're laughing at you. Your vigor.
Oh,
You were
It's awesome.
excited.
You're in your element. This is what God
Nerd
is
is getting
to
deep
do.
in here. All right. So, this is a deity. This is Ishtar. We know that it's Ishtar because of the little star thing up on her helmet. And notice this also is a little bit of a digression that isn't necessarily relevant to the bow. But do you remember way back when we were reading the golden calf story? And I said that they ride these things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see it?
Yep.
She's riding a lion. But You get what I'm saying? This iconography where the deity is riding the animal like this is everywhere. And so that leads some of us, when we read the golden calf story, to say the calf isn't supposed to be the deity. The calf that they make is this. And then they're like, here's your God. See, we didn't make an image of Yahweh. We didn't make that part. We just did it. All right. Anyway, now, so this is Ishtar. And notice what she's doing with the bow. You see that? The bow is turned around.
Yeah.
Okay? So just logic would say that's an image of what?
Surrender.
Not peace. Yeah, peace. Not surrender. This is Ishtar. Yeah, Ishtar surrendering is like Donald Trump saying, "Oops, my bad. I genuinely messed that up." This is not going to happen. Right? And so Ishtar, symbol of peace, and it's a deity with a king. Right? All right. Next one. Okay. This is the broken obelisk. This is fantastic. Now, it's hard to see. Well, I'm going to show it to you, and then we're going to go to the next one because I've got a line drawing that makes it easier to see. This little thing represents the sun because it's the sun deity holding out the bow to the people. All right. That's the image of the actual broken obelisk, but I have a drawing. Right. Somebody drew it out so you can see it better. So do you see it? You got the sun, and the sun is a manifestation of a deity, right? In Bible stuff, it's Shamash. I don't know if you've ever heard of Shamash. And in
Hands are moving.
I just lost my train of thought. Anyway, so you have the sun deity. Okay. Oh, I was going to say in Sumerian, the good stuff, it's Utu. Just thought you should know. Anyway. Wow, I just distracted myself. Anyway.
What's the bigger, why does his head look, looks like a light bulb?
He's got a mega.
Because the surface is damaged, and the person who is making this drawing is trying to represent. We go back to the actual thing, Tim. Do you see how the surface is this is thousands. This.
Okay.
This is like, how old would this be?
Several years old.
It's almost 3,000 years old. So it's several years
So
old.
it's got a little wear and tear.
So it's got a little wear, and that's showing in the.
Definitely not made.
Yeah. Do you see how his head's broken? Right. That's not original to the piece. That's a. All right. Anyway, back to the drawing. So you have the sun god holding out the bow towards people. Make sense? All right, next. What's next? Oh, here, same thing. Sky god, with his wings, like rider of the clouds kind of imagery, which is a phrase that gets applied to Yahweh at some point, which is pretty cool. Holding out the bow.
Kind of looks like a pilot badge.
Yeah, it kind of does. Tim, how many pictures are left? Because I don't want to get to the last picture just yet. Oh, okay. All right. Oh, gosh. All right, go down a little. All right, right there. All right, let's speed up. I thought I was on the last one. All right. More king holding out the outturned bow to, in this case, servants. Right. Next. Next, king holding out outturned bow towards servants. I'm just trying to show that this is like a motif. It's not like there's just one picture. Next, this one's good. King holding out outturned bow to subjected enemy. All right? Here's what I'm trying to get at. Outturned bow is always superior to inferior. It's either a deity to a person or a king to either a subjected enemy or a servant. Okay? In other words, it's never the loser who holds out the outturned bow. All right? Part of what I'm trying to get at with this stuff. Let's do the next one. More of the same, king holding out a bow, subjected to enemy, paying homage. All right, what's next? I have text. Oh, so here's the summary. A bow is used for cessation of hostilities, right? Like the war is over, you know, and it's always the superior who holds out the outturned bow. What's next? Oh, yeah, okay, so then it's just Genesis 9 stuff. Go back up, will you please, Tim? To
Look at that again.
the broken obelisk, right? The one with the light bulb head. Right there, right there. Go to the drawing. I want you to see this. This is a deity holding out a bow to people. What do you think this bow is?
So like a violin.
Peace.
This is rainbow imagery, people. It's rainbow imagery. Okay? You get what I'm saying? All right? So, the thing I'm trying to get at is in Genesis 9, it's not just like when I was a 9th grader on the golf course. It's not just, oh yay, I'm not going to get wiped out in a Noah-like flood today. There's something else going on, right? And what's going on is an ancient Israelite, you know, they would be familiar with this kind of stuff. They would view it as, okay, a cessation of hostilities. Yes, they would view the flood as a hostility. All right? The flood is a uncreation. Okay? And that's what's really critical that you understand there with the flood. If you think about creation, in the beginning, God's going to create, right? Now the earth is formless and void, and darkness is over the surface of the deep. In other words, there's this watery chaos thing that God brings order out of, right? That's what you have through Genesis 1. The flood is a return of that watery chaos. Okay? And the line that the Lord says to Noah is, well, this is Genesis 6. In Genesis 6, verse 5, Yahweh saw how great the wickedness of people had become, that every inclination of the thought of the human heart was only evil all the time. That's that. It's a heck of a statement. Every inclination of the human heart was only evil all the time. That's a pretty awesome line. So the Lord regretted that he had made people on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. So he said, I will wipe from the face of the earth people that I have created, and with them, blah, blah, blah. And then when he talks to Noah, and God tells him, go make an ark. This is verse 13, chapter 6. God said to Noah, I'm going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence. The earth is filled with, violence is fine. I am surely going to destroy both them, and the earth is not, darn it, I hate it when I have to correct translations. What he's saying is, I am going to destroy people with the earth. Okay? It's not that he's going to destroy people and the earth. It's that he's going to destroy people, he's going to use the earth to do it. The point is, you were given the earth, you have corrupted it, so now the earth will corrupt you. And the Hebrew uses the word corrupt. So when it says, wherever it says it, I don't know. I have to look at the Hebrew. I get lost when I'm trying to look at the English, but it's basically people have corrupted their way on the earth. And it's that line I just read. Good grief, it's so disguised in English. Verse 13. God said to Noah, I am the earth is basically he's saying, I have corrupted.
So we just read it. You want me to read it? I can read it.
speaking English then?
It's not an inability to read English. It's an inability to understand what they're translating.
Okay.
And so it's just easier for me.
We can speak in Hebrew.
So he said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me. For the earth is full of Hamas, like violent wickedness. The earth is full of violent wickedness because of them. So I am about to corrupt them with the earth. All right. The thing that what he's saying, it gets lost in translation. He's saying they have corrupted their way upon the earth, so I am going to corrupt them with the earth. The Hebrew uses the same word. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
They have corrupted their way upon the earth, so I will corrupt them with the earth. So you have this flood, these hostilities as a result of people corrupting the earth, corrupting their way, this violent stuff. And so the bow is a cessation of those hostilities. But a bow also it's the one who's in charge who holds out the bow. Right? And if you think about a rainbow, from our perspective, you look up and there's this rainbow. Okay? From the perspective of, use the imagery of a deity in heaven. The deity in heaven is holding out an outturned bow. Like in that picture of the broken obelisk. Does that make sense? That's the imagery in Genesis 9. So yes, it's a statement of cessation of hostilities, but it's also a statement that God's the one in charge, right? You don't. It's the one who's in charge who holds out the bow. There's a clear let's just be clear. Let's have a treaty where we're on equal terms. Okay? This is an affirmation of who's in charge. And the one who is in charge sets the terms. And the terms that he set, that he set in Genesis 9, the term he sets is, never again will I destroy all life on the earth with a flood. To this day, I don't know if it's a promise or a threat. I really don't. I've wondered about it for years. All right? Make sense? It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. And I think for me, like a lot of times I get asked, all this study of their town kind of stuff, are we getting everything wrong, right? It's kind of like this. Once you start studying their town stuff, you learn everything that we screwed up, or whatever. And it's really not so much an issue of, everything you've learned is wrong. Okay? It's really more an issue of a depth of feel for it. Right? Like you don't need any of this background info to know that God's in charge. You don't need any of this background info to read God put a bow in the clouds. You don't need any background info to know that the bow is a sign of the treaty. It says it, right? Like several times. You get what I'm saying? It's not an issue of, you were totally believing something completely wrong. You got some background info, and now it's corrected. It more often than that does sometimes happen, but more often than not, it's a depth of feeling for what's going on. I feel this story differently because of this work. And so part of the goal when we launched the seminary, and before launching the seminary, part of the goal in my teaching at the undergraduate level all the way until tonight, part of the goal of my teaching has always been to try and impart some of that feel for it, because I think it helps us get empathy with the text and to feel it better, and it kind of resonates a little bit more, it's inspiring, I think. And part of then the goal with launching the seminary was this real felt need that at the time, I'm kept up with the research, you know, but at the time it was, you could watch the graph of people leaving the church, generation by generation, you know, to where it was like, the greatest generation was like 3%, and then boomers 5%, Xers, like what I'm at, was up to 12%. By the time you got to millennials, it was 25% walking away from the church. And you just watching this trend line. And one of the things that was coming out in this research that was done with people leaving the church is everything in church feels utterly disassociated from anything that happens in the real world. And so part of the driver behind all of this was we've got to reconnect what these weird stories, like in Genesis 9, we've got to reconnect it with like life, the world. And this stuff does a lot of that, where people walk away going, oh, I can feel it. Sometimes it's nothing more than a map. You know, you're reading some story from a gospel and you just put the map up on the screen. Which now we have Google Earth is amazing because now you can do it where you can like see some of the contours and all that kind of, and it feels more real. And a lot of people, a lot of the stated issue, whether it was the real issue or not, the stated issue is just none of it feels real. It all feels like some, you know, otherworldly, out there thing. So let's ground it and make it feel real. And that was a huge part of the driver of getting people into the context, right? Getting people into the their town context stuff. Part of what I discovered along the way, entirely by accident. This is when I was doing my PhD, and I was studying Sumerian, which is the language that first tablet was. I was studying Sumerian, which is a language that's been dead for 4,000 years. So I would like to encourage you that if you ever want to know what it feels like to just sort of feel useless, or to feel like what you do is useless, study at a PhD level a language that's been dead for 4,000 years. It's amazing. And so I had this experience where, like, on the one hand, I'm like, wow, I got into this like for the benefit of the local church. And now I'm on a train headed down to the University of Chicago reading about Deixis and Sumerian grammar, and like, this feels pretty useless, but I love it, right? It's this like thing. But then an utterly fascinating thing started to happen. I started to get calls from a wide variety of churches, pastors, like youth pastor in small town Iowa, you know, adult discipleship's pastor at a mega church, and a lot of stuff in between, right? And I was like, well, this is kind of interesting. And what I started to realize is they were all asking the same question. They were all asking, in one form or another, how do we reach people in our context? Now, that context was different. It was, I'm a youth pastor in small town Iowa, how do I reach the youth? Which, you know, is very different than the adult discipleship person at Willow Creek who's saying, how do I raise up adults in suburban Chicago? You know, the context was different, but they were all asking me, how do I reach and grow people in my context? And that got me going on, why are people calling me about context? About how to reach people in their context. What do I know about small town Iowa? Like nothing. I remember guest preaching at a small church in Iowa, and some dude before me during announcements said stuff, and he used words like combine and other things, and I didn't have a clue what he was talking about. You know, and it was amazing to just kind of watch the room, and everyone's like, you know, and I'm like, I don't know. I can tell you're naming farm implements, but if there were pictures of it, I wouldn't be able to match the words with the pictures, you know. And so, but you're asking me like how to reach these people. Why is this? And what I learned over time was the ability to understand the context of Scripture, ancient context, had wired me to be intuitive about how to contextualize in modern situations. And so when we did the seminary, there was a drive towards, we've got to make the classes, the Bible classes, context heavy. We've got to get them into the world, not only for their understanding of Scripture, but because it will intuitively, without them even knowing it, train them how to reach people in their context, whatever it is. And so when we, look at this picture, and then go all the way to the bottom, Tim. When we enlisted Nate Perry to design a logo, he riffed on that idea. And anyway, that was where all of that came from. Becky?
What? Well, I really like the ghost story. It's good. It was a fun discovery, and at the time when he did paper and stuff, there was this time when somebody footnoted him, which was a big day at our house, but it was a short, like that's where the name Footnote came from, because we're like, this is it. This is it. Like all of the work, and it really is for possible footnote maybe. But yeah. So anyway, that's a fun story.
Yeah, I think, yeah, so to fill in a little detail, because some people might not have the slightest clue what footnote is, but I did a not-for-profit.
Podcast on Apple Podcasts.
Did a not-for-profit aimed at biblical principles applied to business leadership stuff. And it was called Footnote. And there was a person at that somewhere. I don't remember if he was at St. Andrews or it might have been a different conference, but he heard this. And yeah,
He's like, oh, I footnoted
he
you.
came up to me one day at a conference and he was like, Eric, here's my new book. You're the only person I footnoted in the book. Because he had tried to write a real popular level book, and so he didn't do a bunch of references and academic footnotes and stuff, but he was like, for whatever reason, he footnoted the reference to this work. But I think, when Becky and I got home last week and we were kind of talking about Ecclesiastes, and I was like, I don't know, did I get too worked up? And Becky was like, yeah, Ecclesiastes hits home. There was a conversation about kind of sharing some of the story of our story as it pertains to Ecclesiastes, right? Like Becky and I have tried to be faithful with the gift, right? There's been an element of like steward what you've been given. There's been an element of figure out how the Lord wired things to work and act accordingly, right? I mean, I clearly have a bent for the study. There's stuff, right, where it's like, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, you were, well, as you said, whatever that clever thing you said was when I was geeking out about the Ishtar's ride. But, so there is that stuff. But it's also been like ridiculous. Like just the iterations over the years of like, Lord, is this how we be faithful with this? You're teaching undergraduates, but then you're like, but academically I've completely like outgrown this, which, I don't mean to sound rude, but it's kind of like, I think you need to be in a more rigorous environment, and then several seminaries started pursuing me, like the prestigious ones, and you're like, well, I think that the Lord is opening this door to move on to the next thing, you know, and then that just nothing happens, nothing comes of it, and you're like, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, you know. And there was a time where it was like, I have all this stuff and the church needs it, so I need to be a pastor, or maybe I need to plant a church, you know. Matthew walked through those iterations with lots of conversations about, should I plant a church? Should I do something out of weight, you know? And it's never worked. It's never, I don't know how to explain it. It's never happened. The several instances of, well, I guess I should be a teaching pastor, right? Because then I need to find an environment where I can be a teaching pastor and I don't have to be the one doing all the administrative, you know, stuff, because where I'm really gifted is like study and teach, and the number of times, well, I mean, it's not a huge number, but it's enough of a number where it's like, oh, you're a finalist all the way, you know, you're a candidate, all the way to like, yeah, we're gonna hire you. You know, we just have to finish the negotiating, get the approval from the elders, etc. And then for whatever reason, it just doesn't happen. And I'm like, man, my journey makes no sense. And there's anyway, I don't know if I'm saying the stuff that you recommended.
Well, I think we wanted to encourage everybody that, you know, that try of what, you know, what it could be for you, you know, is how you're wired and how what trips you, you know, what gets your heart ablaze, you know, and what is it? Is it being at home with your babies, you know? Is it teaching kids that have special needs? Is it connecting with people and selling them something, you know, like, I feel like sometimes people, just the journey of getting to know the Bible better and getting to know it to the level kind of taught like this, sometimes it feels like well, now I don't feel like I can read the Bible anymore and really actually understand it. And that's like the last thing we would want to do is do that, or encourage that in any way. So to go after your own stuff is the thing. I think that we were like, that's what we were wanting to encourage. And after your own fire, I guess. Does that make sense? We both say, does that make sense a lot? Just because
I never know if I'm making sense.
Yeah.
So. Questions, thoughts, comments, cares, concerns? All right, I mean it when I say that this has been just utterly life-giving for me. It's especially wonderful to be in front of people. The seminary went to Zoom 3 years before anyone knew what Zoom was. And we did it because we needed to go national and then eventually international, and it was a way where we could have classes, do them live, have real interaction, and have people from Minnesota and Texas and Omaha and California all in the room together. So going to Zoom was the correct decision for the seminary. We started experimenting with that in 2015. So we were a little bit ahead of the pandemic. So correct move for the seminary, and a real joy stealer for me, because as a professor, there's nothing that can replace the joy of being in the in the room together. I don't know how to explain it. Like, my colleagues loved Zoom. They were like, this is so much better, it's amazing, I can do this and I can do that, and I'm like, I just, for whatever reason, how I'm wired, this has been, really, it's just been a good season for me, so thank you for that.
Thank you.